Morning, everyone. I'm Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. I'm proud to represent the 8th Congressional District in New York, several neighborhoods in Brooklyn and Queens, and a majority minority district that I've had the opportunity to serve for the better part of the last 10 years. I'm pleased to be here with Jerry, Fulvia, and Kiana, who work at 3 incredibly important organizations for fairness and truth and justice in the city of New York: the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, Latino Justice Pearl Deaf, and the Center for Law and Social Justice at Medgar Evers. We live in a representative democracy where the people from every community should have a meaningful opportunity to have their voices heard in who represents them in government and how district lines are drawn as it relates to both the state legislature and the United States House of Representatives. Every 10 years, there's a redistricting process that takes place. And it's important for every single community to have their voices heard in that redistricting process. But there's a real danger that that will not be the case in New York State right now because of the decisions that have been set in motion by the Court of Appeals in sending the redistricting case back to Judge McAllister in Steuben County in the village of Bath. The Court of Appeals said that anyone who wishes to have their voices heard as it relates to the redistricting process should have an opportunity to do so. But Judge McAllister in Steuben County made a decision that there will be one hearing this week on a Friday in Steuben County in the village of Bath that no one from downstate New York can reasonably get to with any degree of ease. You cannot reach Steuben County by plane. You cannot reach Steuben County by train. Amtrak does not go there. You cannot reasonably reach Steuben County via bus. It takes 10 hours. And the only bus that gets there leaves Port Authority at 1:30 a.m. It turns out that Steuben County and the village of Bath are closer to Cleveland, Ohio, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Toronto, Canada, than it is to the city of New York. That is not acceptable. Millions and millions of voters here in New York City, throughout downstate New York, are unable to have their voices heard in this redistricting process. That is unacceptable. That is unconscionable. That is un-American. And we are calling upon Judge McAllister to open up the redistricting process, hold hearings in downstate New York, in the city of New York, on Long Island, in the northern suburbs, in the Hudson Valley, in upstate cities like Buffalo, Rochester, and Albany, so that the people's voices can be heard in this very important redrawing of legislative and congressional lines. It's now my honor to yield to Jerry Guatemala from the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund.
Thank you, Congressman. Thank you for having this event. You know, ALDEF was founded in 1974. We are a national civil rights organization, and we focus on protecting the civil rights of Asian Americans, including voting rights. Right now, Asian immigrants, Asian Americans are under attack in this city suffering from anti-Asian violence. We need our voices heard. We need fair and effective representation. Asian Americans grew at the fastest rate of any racial group in this city and in this country. The new redistricting lines should reflect the census and the growth that we've seen in the community. We need fair and effective representation now more than ever, and this process is fundamentally unfair. If you took just the population of Asians in New York City alone, we would be one of the largest cities in this country. It's unconscionable to have one hearing upstate and effectively silencing our voices at this very precarious time for our community. We need more hearings. We're calling on the court to open up the hearings as the congressman has called for. Thank you. I'm going to yield to Fulvia.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Latino Justice Pro-Def, a civil rights nonprofit that works to advance and promote the rights of Latinos across the United States. What we now have is a process that is completely unraveled and now lies in the hands of the court. So we saw both senatorial and congressional districts were overturned. New Yorkers will now have to participate in 2 primaries this summer, further confusing voters. And throughout this legal process, the voice that has been left out is that of New York City residents. There is no video conferencing that will be provided or alternative accessibility for individuals who cannot travel to Bath, New York, or who are non-English speakers. That means that if you're a non-English speaker and you want to participate in this democratic process, you have no ability to do so in the manner that the court has set up the hearing for Friday. This is a city where more than half of the population identifies as Black, Latino, or Asian, and yet we are seeing no effort to ensure the participation of these communities. Access to the ballot remains a crucial aspect of having a representative democracy. This is why we, as a Unity Map Coalition, we came together to advance electoral power among our communities. If we are holding a redistricting process that is not inclusive of all New Yorkers, we are allowing districts to be drawn without the voice of the very community in which these electoral districts are meant to empower. We call on the court to issue an order holding additional hearings in New York City, an order that will ensure that accessibility is granted to non-English speakers who wish to participate in this electoral process, and ensure that language is not a barrier to participate in the redistricting process. The court should also ensure that we cannot let this process continue to be shaped by individuals who really have no stake in these districts. These districts will be in place for the next decade, and as such, it is the community who should be at the forefront of any decision-making, any participation that is going to be granted by the court throughout this redistricting process. Thank you.
Good morning. The Center for Law and Social Justice is New York's only law center that's dedicated to advancing equity and justice for people of African descent. Due to the recent court order, New York must now redraw its congressional and state Senate electoral maps. This decision has tossed the state's upcoming primaries into chaos. The Center for Law and Social Justice is deeply concerned that the next attempt at redistricting will deny communities of color, including communities protected by the Voting Rights Act, the chance to contribute in the process. Right now, there's a brief window for public comment and just a single opportunity for New Yorkers to testify at the court hearings scheduled for May 6, 2022 in Bath, New York this Friday. The location is extremely remote and makes it nearly impossible for New Yorkers to weigh in on the redistricting process in any meaningful way. Communities of color, particularly those with limited transportation options, will be excluded from the hearing because it is inaccessible by public transit. CLSJ joins our colleagues and calls upon the New York Supreme Court to schedule additional hearings throughout our state, including New York City, Westchester, Albany, and Buffalo, before issuing its ruling on electoral districts. This will allow all New Yorkers to participate in the process and ensure our voices and our voters are respected. Thank you.
I thank these wonderful advocates for their words today and the work of these three incredible organizations in making sure that concepts of fair and equitable representation, equal protection under the law, liberty and justice for all are true here in New York City and New York State. And we'll continue to fight to make sure that these principles have life breathed into them. The notion that there will be a singular hearing in the village of Bath to draw legislative and congressional lines that will be in effect for 10 years without any opportunity for communities of color, black communities, Latino communities, and Asian American communities to be heard is a disgrace. Should not happen anywhere in the United States of America. It certainly shouldn't be happening here in New York State. And we call upon Judge McAllister in Steuben County to immediately open up the process and allow for the voices of the people of all of New York State to be heard. Questions?
Starting on topic, why is the statewide hearing process you're suggesting necessary when you look at what the independent redistricting committee did? And independent of their outcome, there's binders of testimony that accomplish what you're suggesting. So why is this necessary?
I'll yield to the lawyers to amplify any response that I make, but there's nothing within the Court of Appeals decision which suggests that Judge McAllister and the special master, who's unelected and from out of town, are bound by any of the testimony that has been already offered by the people of the state of New York in terms of the independent redistricting commission process. This coalition of the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, Latino Justice, and the Center for Law and Social Justice have put forth a unity map that reflects the hopes, the dreams, the aspirations, the sentiments of communities of color throughout New York City and beyond. To the extent that that unity map is taken seriously by Judge McAllister and the special master, that would be a good thing. But there are no guarantees right now that that in fact will be the case based on the Court of Appeals decision.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, as the Congressman mentioned, there was nothing in the order requiring the court in Steuben County to actually take into account the IRC hearings and all the testimonies. Any criticisms of our map, of the unity map, and responding to the court or any questions they may have, we have to physically go up there to answer those. And we're not able to do that remotely. So we are, in fact, required to go up there to defend our maps. And there's no other option. The IRC testimonies, we answered questions from that commission, but the court may have additional questions that are not addressed in the IRC testimony.
Congressman, we're obviously on a pretty compressed timeline. August 23rd is the primary, and as it is, I think there's something like 50 days from the time the lines are set for petitioning and the whole process before the ballot is finalized. So if we hold hearings around the state, doesn't that delay the process and create even more of a problem in terms of the timeline?
Court of Appeals has a choice to make. Either we're going to have a fair process that's inclusive of everyone, or we're going to have a very limiting process with a single hearing in the village of Bath where one judge elected by a handful of people will basically oversee a process of lines being drawn by an out-of-town, unelected special master. That's not acceptable in the state of New York or anywhere in the United States of America. The Court of Appeals has enough time to order that hearings take place in person all across the state of New York, and that virtual options be put forward so that people don't have to travel in order to participate and allow their voices to be heard.
Can you talk about the federal lawsuit filed by Democrats nationally? What's the expectation for relief there, and is there any hope that that changes this equation?
Well, it's a federal lawsuit that's pending, so I'll reserve comment other than to say that some of the issues that have been raised in that lawsuit relate to the fact that downstate communities of color are being denied a meaningful opportunity for their voices to be heard in the redistricting process as a result of what the judge in Steuben County has ordered related to a single hearing that almost no one from the vast majority of the state of New York can get to.
We pivot to sorry.
I'm happy to add, one of the things that I know people are concerned about is the fact that, yes, this may impact primaries if additional hearings are held across the state. But one of the things we have to remember is that these districts will be in place for the next decade, right? So we're not talking about the primaries of just 2022. We're talking about elections all through 2032, right? And what that will mean for our communities if they are part of districts where they don't have meaningful access to the ballot. So that's our main concern, ensuring that there is an opportunity for people to engage with the process and be part of these districts where they have a meaningful say in electing their representatives.
And just backing up for a second, what were your thoughts, Congressman, on the Court of Appeals decision in the first place? Do you disagree that this was partisan gerrymandering?
Well, the Court of Appeals, at minimum, as every other court throughout the nation has done, when they found that there were flaws in a plan put forward by the legislature, could have given the New York State legislature, the elected representatives of the people of the state of New York, an opportunity to cure the maps that they claim are flawed. That was not done. And the question, I think, that should reasonably be asked is, why did the Court of Appeals not give the New York State legislature, the elected representatives of diverse communities, an opportunity to cure the allegedly flawed map? Instead, the Court of Appeals sent the redistricting process to a single judge in Steuben County, closer to Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Toronto than it is the city of New York, for one hearing. That's problematic.
Can we pivot to off topic? I wasn't sure if you wanted to say goodbye to your guests.
Yeah, does anyone else want to comment on? Okay, yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you.
As a matter of background, Chief Justice Roberts did just confirm that the political leak of the decision written by Justice Alito was indeed valid and ordered an investigation. So with that, this was a legitimate draft opinion. What are your next steps as one of the top leaders in the Democratic caucus?
Well, Leader Schumer has indicated that the legislation that we sent over from the House, which would affirm a woman's right to choose and make her own health care decisions, will be brought to the floor of the Senate for a vote. That's an appropriate step legislatively. This right-wing Supreme Court's attack on a woman's right to make her own health care decisions is shameful, and I don't think it will be accepted by the vast majority of the American people as legitimate.
And are you implying won't be accepted electorally, and is that the first and best recourse as suggested by President Biden in his statement?
Well, everyone should exercise their right to vote and recognize what's happening in this country, which is that a small minority of folks, aided and abetted by unelected right-wing Supreme Court justices, two of whom were illegitimately appointed to the court because they were seats that were stolen, one from President Obama and the other from President Biden, should concern everyone. And everybody should go out there and vote your values.
Do you have any reason, though, to think that legislation could pass the Senate, given the current makeup?
We'll have to see. But the attack on the freedom of a woman to make her own health care decisions is one of the gravest assaults on liberty that we've seen in America in decades. And we can never surrender.
Can we also ask about, on yet another topic, Your colleague Antonio Delgado was named today, as you know, the new candidate for lieutenant governor. Is that a good choice?
Well, Antonio Delgado is a tremendous public servant who's made a difference during his time in the House of Representatives, fighting for the people of the 19th Congressional District in the Hudson Valley. The House's loss will be New York State's gain in terms of his service as lieutenant governor.
You mentioned the House has lost. Your majority is already fairly narrow, and it just got a little bit narrower. Is that going to be a problem for you?
Well, we're going to have to get through this redistricting process here in New York and make sure that there's a fair and reasonable opportunity for every single New Yorker's voice to be heard, particularly Black, Latino, and Asian American communities here in New York City. And then we'll see what the map looks like. It's my expectation that strong candidates will emerge to the extent there's a vacancy in terms of the seat that Antonio Delgado will be leaving. But you know, there's a long way between here and there, and the first thing that needs to happen is we've got to get fair maps. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.